The Expedition into the Madness. I cannot help but shudder and tremble as I sit down to pen the events of the expedition into the heart of that cursed rainforest. Even the mere act of recalling the horrors that I have witnessed fills me with a fear so profound that I fear I may never again find peace of mind. But I must tell this tale, for the sake of those who may still venture forth where I did, unaware of the dangers that lie in wait. It began with a seemingly innocuous decision to embark on a solo expedition into the uncharted depths of the rainforest. I was drawn by the promise of unspoiled wilderness and the thrill of discovery. But I had no idea of the horrors that awaited me. As I ventured deeper into the jungle, the verdant canopy closed in around me, blocking out the light of the sun and casting a perpetual twilight over my surroundings. The sounds of the forest were a constant cacophony of chirping insects, croaking amphibians, and the rustling of leaves underfoot. But it was not just the flora and fauna that I had to contend with. There were other things in that forest, things that should not be. At first, I dismissed them as tricks of my mind, the product of my overactive imagination. But as the days wore on and the darkness closed in around me, I began to fear that I was not alone. The first sign of trouble came on the third night of my journey. As I sat huddled in my tent, a sound echoed through the jungle that sent shivers down my spine. It was a low, guttural moan, like the growl of some monstrous beast. But it was not just the sound itself that unnerved me. It was the fact that it seemed to be emanating from all around me, as if the very forest itself was alive. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, that the sound was the product of some nocturnal animal, but the feeling of unease lingered, and I found myself unable to sleep. The next day, as I pressed on deeper into the jungle, I stumbled across a clearing unlike any I had seen before. In the center of the clearing stood a monolithic structure, unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was made of a strange black stone and covered in twisting organic symbols that seemed to writhe and pulse in the half-light. As I approached the structure, a feeling of dread washed over me. It was as if some primal instinct was warning me to stay away, to turn back and never return. But I could not resist the pull of the unknown, and so I stepped forward. As I drew closer to the structure, the symbols on its surface seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, and the air grew thick with a nauseating odor like rotting meat. I felt my skin crawl, as if some unseen force was probing my mind, seeking out my deepest fears and desires, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation passed. I stood before the structure, dazed and confused, wondering what had just happened. It was then that I noticed the journal lying on the ground at my feet. It was bound in some kind of scaly hide and covered in the same twisting symbols as the monolith. I picked it up, curious despite my growing sense of unease. As I read the journal, my mind began to unravel. The words on the page were like a poison, seeping into my consciousness and corrupting my thoughts. The writer spoke of unspeakable horrors, of eldritch entities that lurked beyond the boundaries of our reality, waiting to devour the unwary. But it was not just the words that disturbed me. There were sketches and diagrams depicting the most grotesque and incomprehensible creatures, with tentacles and eyes and mouths where no creature should have them. The more I read, the more I felt as if I was slipping into madness. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the madness lifted. I looked up from the journal, my mind reeling, and saw that the monolith was gone. In its place stood a gaping maw, leading down into a dark and twisting tunnel that seemed to stretch on into infinity. I knew then that I had to leave, to flee that cursed place before it consumed me entirely, but even as I turned to go, I knew that it was already too late. The knowledge I had gained, the horrors I had witnessed, would stay with me forever. I stumbled through the jungle, my mind reeling, barely able to make sense of the world around me. Days passed, or perhaps weeks, I could not tell. But eventually I stumbled back into civilization, a broken and shattered shell of my former self. And now, as I sit here penning these words, I know that my fate is sealed, for anyone who reads this journal will be cursed, just as I have been. They will feel the pull of that cursed rainforest, the temptation to seek out the unspeakable secrets that lie hidden there. And when they do, they will find the same horrors that I did, and they too will be consumed. My mind will never be the same after the ungodly horrors that I witnessed, so heed my warning, dear reader, and never venture into that cursed place.